Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Poema podcast. I'm James Prescott, your host. Welcome to the show. It's really great to have you all here again. And with me today is a regular guest on the podcast. I cannot remember how many times they've been on the podcast now. And generally, it's been about Taylor Swift, and it's not going to be about Taylor Swift today. But welcome back to the show, Jenna DeWitt.
Thank you, James. It's so good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. It's always fun to have you on the podcast. We always have some great conversations. And as I said, it's normally about Taylor Swift, and I'm sure there'll be more about Taylor Swift in the future. There's going to be a lot because she's going to release more music, and so we'll have a lot more to talk about. But today, it's about something completely different. It's about a show that we both love, TV show that we both love, Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And Jenna, you're going to kind of introduce Doctor Who for those who don't know that in the show.
Right. So we're going to say from right at the beginning, if you're familiar with Doctor Who, this is going to contain all of the spoilers for the most recent season. So if you aren't caught up and you don't want spoilers, join us next time. For those who aren't, this is a show that's been running for 60 years, primarily on and by and through the BBC. But it has also been streaming on American streaming services. I started watching on Netflix, and then it went to Amazon Prime, and then it was on HBO Max. So if you want to watch 2005 to 2022 episodes, that kind of the revival season, that's where those are. And now Disney Plus has the 2023 and 2024 ones. So spreading the love all over America here. But the premise of the show, there's this main character who travels throughout time and space in a time machine. And it's shaped like this blue British police box from the 60s, which was modern day when the show started. It was a way of like blending in with the surroundings. But of course, police boxes have gone away and aren't a thing anymore. And then the iconic shape is more known for that now. This main character has primarily been a man, though there have been women recently. And they keep going because the character is an alien called a Time Lord who can cheat death through shape shifting. So instead of dying, he or she changes into a new actor, a process called regeneration, which serves the purpose of keeping the show going for 60 years, even though the actors' contracts are up or they move on to other projects or, they age out. So we're currently on Doctor number 15, though that's a loose number but just as far as the big main starring title character actors go, number 15. There's always a companion, usually a human or two or three along for the ride, who serve as a connection point for the audience. Someone relatable, someone the doctor can explain stuff to so that we, the audience, can understand what's happening. They all travel in this machine called the TARDIS, which is initialism for time and relative dimension in space. Do not worry if that sounds sciencey and pretentious, because there's very little actual science in this show. It's the king of the genre of hand wavy sci-fi, timey-wimey. It's really more of a time travel fantasy. So that would kind of be my summary of Doctor Who. As an American, I got into this in my mid-20s. A lot of people had told me I should watch it because I really loved a lot of British media. But I bet your story is probably different in relation to it, James, because you were raised there.
Yes, I grew up. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and so I started watching the show in the 80s when I think Peter Davison was the Doctor when I started watching it. It was a bit scary when Tom Baker was Doctor. Like, it's actually less scary now with the CGI stuff than it was with like the handmade monsters. Like, honestly, so I started with him. Peter Davison, the Fifth Doctor. His daughter is married to the 10th Doctor,
Yes.
uh, David Tennant, who was also the 14th Doctor as well. Yes, and actually his daughter was in Doctor Who as the Doctor's daughter, which is one of those little quirks that you get in the show. You get those little things happening. It's and old actors returning and old companions returning, and it's kind of a family. The
It
Doctor
really
Who kind
is.
of people who are in Doctor Who, and it's actually been a show that's had a lot of people who've gone on to become really great actors. So Andrew Garfield was in Doctor Who before he really kind of became a big Hollywood actor. Olivia Colman was in Doctor Who as well. I mean, there's loads. Like Karen Gillan was got her big break in Doctor Who as the Doctor's companion. Is now a huge actress in her own right. Thanks to Guardians of the Galaxy and a lot of other things that she's done. Yeah, so there's a lot of Matt Smith obviously was the Doctor and has now been really successful in a lot of other things. So yeah, it's one of those shows, and yeah, it's been going for 61 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons is, I think, the not just the character but the regenerations, because when it regenerates, it almost becomes a new show. Because although when the Doctor regenerates, they're the same person with the same memories and the same character and the same values, their personality is very different, and obviously they have different companions, and they change. They normally change the opening credits sequence and stuff every time there's a new Doctor. So it's almost like a new show every 4 or 5 years, which is one of the reasons it keeps going. It keeps evolving, and we're going to touch on something to do with this today, because obviously with constant changes of doctors and doctors dying, because every Doctor is very, very different. It's not, they're very unique. It's not like you can just like, oh, it's just another Doctor, because you kind of get attached to Doctors, and everyone kind of has their own Doctor, right? And so when the Doctor kind of changes, there's a grieving that goes on, and the Doctor has to deal with that too, because they have to deal with their own death,
Mm-hmm.
even though they're not actually dying. Um, and obviously the changes of companions and stuff, and so we're going to talk about that today. Yeah, just introduce us to that part of it, Jenna.
So I'm so excited to dive in. So we found out that we are going to have our first Black Doctor this year, end of last year, Ncuti Gatwa. And I had watched his previous show, Sex Education. It was incredible. I knew who's going to rock this.
Yeah,
But Ncuti brings this maturity and depth and range that are just phenomenal. You can see the grief play out, and he's not afraid to show his emotions, whereas other doctors are more stoic and are more reserved. And um, you had David Tennant's doctor, who was kind of the original reaction GIF, if you remember 10 years ago on the internet, on Pinterest or Facebook or whatever. There was this man crying in the rain, and that was kind of the original
oh,
reaction GIF. And so it's like, yeah, that's
that's still
another
used
doctor.
now. That is still
Right.
used
Yeah.
now, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah,
David Tennant crying, and then you've got other doctors that are more bouncy and fun and they move on from things. But I think it meant a lot to me that we saw the 15th Doctor Ncuti and David Tennant's 14th Doctor together in the first episode of this season.
oh,
Because for lore reasons, people have issues with, they call it a bi-generation instead of a regeneration, where you're moving from one doctor to the other, because there is that grieving period. And if you come into that politically with everyone's favorite, David Tennant is massively popular, and then you go directly into the first Black Doctor. He's, has Rwandan descent. He's, maybe there are some parts of the fandom who did not enjoy a woman doctor that would, be this, the wokeism, but they shut that down. And so they get David Tennant and Ncuti interacting, and, you get
yeah.
this fan favorite coming in and literally hugging the next doctor and working together and blessing him and sending him on his way. And really it's the other way around too, is it's Shuti's doctor saying, you can rest, you can
That
heal, you can
moment
have
where,
leaving that
yeah,
grief.
that moment where Tennant's Doctor, who's essentially the Doctor who's been like the last 19 years or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
who's been through all this trauma and had the trauma of the Time Wars, where he had to kill the Daleks, like
Mm-hmm.
basically commit genocide, right?
And his own people too, yeah.
And he carried around that for a long time, even though they kind of rewrote history in The Day of the Doctor, which was really cool because they ended up not doing that after all. But they forgot that they did that, so he still has that. And that Doctor had a lot of heaviness to
Yeah.
them, and a lot of, and had lost so many people,
Mm-hmm.
so many friends. It was just carrying around all this grief, and like Chuti's Doctor was like you can, because it was a bi generation, he didn't have that. he was kind of like the healed part, I suppose. And this is very internal family systems, by the way. I've done a podcast on this. It's a type of therapy where you have parts which are trauma responses, but you can personalize them and make them into people, different parts of yourself. So it was like, for me, that was a really emotional moment, because it was like the healed older self kind of giving a hug to your traumatized self and saying it's going to be okay. You can rest. And then he did, which was great. I love that. I love that he got a happy ending, that doctor, because he doesn't have to carry all that stuff around anymore, and he can just rest
Yeah.
and be with family. Because he finds a family, doesn't he? So
Yeah. I think it's important to realize that even though we're healing and we're moving on and we've done the work, the doctor still wonders throughout the season, from the very first episode to the very last, is that he wonders if he's the bad luck. Do I bring more suffering than joy to this world? And his friends have to remind him, like, no, you bring life, you bring joy.
yeah,
And so that
yeah,
we're seeing the end of this season arc, like he's able to claim that for himself and say, I am bringing life. I am working toward this goal, and resting in that. But there's the doubt of, like, maybe I'm the bad luck in people's life. Maybe I'm the one who's bringing death with me. And I think that's important, that we continue to heal. We're not just, leaving, okay, that we grieved, goodbye. Like, have a
exactly.
time,
That's it.
I'm going
That's
to
it.
have to do more stuff. But he's like
Yeah,
constantly working on that, of like having to remember who he really is and that he's not the bad thing.
yeah. Like the growth, the journey of healing, and I've talked about this a lot. It never ends. It's always going on. You're always grieving. You're always processing some kind of trauma. You're always processing some kind of emotional, um, you know, um, problems or whatever. Because that's what life is about. We go through things all the time, which cause us emotional harm or which trigger us, or so we're always having to process all of that, and it's just a daily journey. Uh, I mean, there are parts of us where we can say that we've probably done most of our healing. Like, I've done most of my healing for losing my mum, but that doesn't mean I don't still feel that. It doesn't mean I don't still experience grief for that. Like, it doesn't mean that doesn't get triggered sometimes. It's still there. It hasn't disappeared. It's just that the weight of it is not so heavy anymore, right? And I think that's what the doctor kind of loses. He loses the weight of it, but he still has those insecurities, and he still has those memories, and um, and he still has love for all the people that he used to travel with. I mean, he mentions in this season, he mentions one of the first people that he traveled with, his granddaughter, right,
Yeah.
who hasn't really been mentioned at all in Doctor Who since he was in the show, really, and was just, I think that's a good pointer to the fact that this is the same Doctor. He still has all these memories, and he is this old, like he's thousands of years old.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, you're right. Chuti Gatwa just performs it so well. He conveys emotion so well, without words as well. Just by the look on his face, or the tears, or the expressions, or whatever, his body language, he can just convey emotion really, really well. I mean, he's an incredible actor.
Well, and
And
then, sorry.
no, go on.
Uh, we also have the incredibly talented Millie Gibson. So we've got, the companions are always my favorite part. We've got Ruby, this season's companion, and we meet her. She's having a lot of bad luck, for plot reasons, but particularly she's trying to find her birth mother. She's been raised by this wonderful woman, who is her mother and her adoptive grandmother. But the central question around her is this mystery that builds up over the season, is this loss of identity and this mystery of why her birth mother abandoned her so soon after birth at the church. And on the other end, the doctor wonders if he's the bad luck. And then you've got this grief and loss in his life. And the doctor has recently found out that he was also abandoned as a child and adopted into a society. And this theme of loss could be ambiguous loss. It's not necessarily just like, saying goodbye and grieving a friend who's died, but this ambiguous loss of, what are my origins? What happened? Why was I abandoned by people who were supposed to love me? It's not a total downer of a show. This sounds like a really sad show, but even the doctor is telling this space captain of the ship is a toddler, and she's leading this space station of abandoned babies, and he tells her about his story of being abandoned and adopted, and that's Ruby's story, and says, "I'm the only one like me in the universe," and that's true of everyone that exists. It's not just a special chosen one magic person. It's that even Ruby and this Poppy child and like, all these people throughout the thing is, you're so special, like, and there's no one like you. And that's true of everyone. That it's not just
Mm.
special people get special things and other people are normies. It's that every single person has dignity and worth.
Yeah, and that's part of who the Doctor is. He's a very hopeful person.
Yeah.
He or she, they they believe in people. They have hope in people. They can see the best in people always, and that's grounded in their own experience. Like, because that's where real hope comes from. Is when you've been through a lot of things and you're still here and you're still thriving and you're still alive and you're still doing your thing. You realize there is hope, and so the Doctor just does that all the time wherever he goes. He leaves people better than he met them generally, and they're better people for being with him, and he gives them belief in themselves and gives them an identity and gives them safety. He's a safe place for good people. He's a safe place. You know, um, in the end, the only people who need to be scared of him are the bad people. It's. I'm
Well,
saying
yeah.
him because we've got a male Doctor at the moment, but if it was a female Doctor, I'd be saying she. So yes,
I'll say the show is not afraid to get political either, and never has been. This is not a 2024, now the show is going woke. It's from the very beginning. It's always been this political commentary on what's happening in the day, because we're not just grieving the loss of people to death or ambiguous loss in social relationships. It's our political landscape as well. So there's this commentary on in this season on the birthing these babies on this manufactured space
mm,
station and not taking care of them. So the law says you can't stop birthing the babies, but the law also doesn't provide for them. And there's the trouble with being a refugee, is that you have to get to someone else's shore. People can't come rescue you. And you are so tied to technology that you don't even notice people dying around you. And it's like there's all this commentary that's kind of woven throughout, that we have to have the comfort with vulnerability, the ability to look around us and see what's actually happening and advocate for better, and being willing
mm,
to see it versus there's an episode where a father dies and the daughter, instead of like helping what's going on in the situation, she's like, okay, this hologram of my dad can show me pictures of our memories together, and like she just completely
yeah,
shuts
yeah,
out the grief of the situation that's happening,
yeah.
and
That's
we
right.
see that
Yeah,
over and over again.
and I mean that I was going to come to that episode because that's a
Yeah,
very
yeah.
there's a lot of political commentary in that episode as well, because you have this war going on, but the war is started by the company that makes the weapons
Hmm.
and they have to they have this kind of number of people they have to kill to satisfy the company almost. It's like, so we build these weapons of war, and now we're giving you a quota as to how many people you have to kill, and rather than kind of like fighting over a cause, like whether like somebody's invading somebody's land or whatever, that kind of thing. It's just like we're just fighting a war for the sake of fighting a war because the military industrial complex wants to make money.
Mhm. And
And that's very big commentary on modern day. I mean, like I've been watching a lot of documentaries about the Cold War and like the missile crisis and all of that kind of thing. There's this really good one on Netflix which I recommend to people called Turning Point. I recommend that to everyone. And like it really does, like, to me anyway, it kind of came across that there's a lot of people in the kind of military industrial complex, like people in the army, people, weapons companies, even some people in government who represented them, who almost wanted a nuclear war just so they could use their weapons. And
mhm.
it was left up to a few individuals who were good people. Some of them were presidents, some of them were just random people working at like weapons factories, who stopped that happening. Uh, and so when after having seen that and then seeing that episode of Doctor Who, it was like, oh my word, yeah,
Yeah.
this is Doctor Who's not afraid to talk about those kind of things, and that's one
And
of the things I love about the show.
how parts of us that are good, like seeking beauty or seeking community, religion is so weaponized, and it brings into that so much of this is capitalism. So much of this is people just wanting to provide for their families, but you've got the weapons industry using capitalism and using religion and weaponizing all these things. Even music, at one point in another episode gets weaponized. It's like all of these things that are just like, even the Beatles in this one episode are saying like, hey, we're not really into music, like we're just using this dying industry to make money. And it's like, even here in this one, you've got like this intense theme of this religion that's being used, their belief is being used as their military, and you can get anybody to believe anything. But in the midst of all of that, Ruby sees her first planet, and there's beauty, and there's music in the music episode, and there's a song in that the Doctor sings that's just hauntingly brilliant. So they're weaving in, like, even in the midst of the darkest times, you've got beauty and music and connection and family. And but
Yeah,
then you've also got the system, the industry is like this ambulance that kills people that don't, fit its casualty rate, saying, "Oh, thoughts and prayers." And it's like, that's exactly what
yeah, I
happens.
know.
The machine says
Yeah,
thoughts and prayers, and it doesn't do anything to save you. It just kills us more and more.
yeah. I mean, that was huge, wasn't it? I mean, we all know about the thoughts and prayers thing. Like everyone, I think pretty much everyone recognizes that now. I mean, in America especially, that everyone will recognize that. This series will be definitely. I think the series has probably gone out in America more than other series because it's been on Disney Plus, and because of the time it's released as well, which is like Friday evening in America. So yeah, that was massive, that one. And there's another episode as well, like the bubble one. I can't remember. It's something in
Mm-hmm.
bubble.
Dot and
Yeah,
bubble, yeah.
yeah, where and that episode has so much commentary on so many different things that like I even missed some of the things it was commenting on until the second time I saw it. Like, because the first time I was like, okay, the bubble thing is like we can be so wrapped up in the digital world we lose track of what's real and what isn't, and we can get so caught up in that of what's real and what isn't, that we disconnect from reality, right? And that is part of the story. But there's another story as well, which is like about white privilege
Yes.
and all of that, and that's much more subtle in the story, but it's there, and it's well, it's subtle if you're a white person anyway. I'll be honest, I'm a white person, so maybe my privilege hid me from seeing that, like to start with. But and then there's this idea that some people don't want to be saved,
Mm-hmm.
and that scene at the end of that episode where the Doctor is like, "Come with me, I want to save you. Like, I can get you out of here." And they don't just turn him down, they basically insult him.
Yeah.
And it's like that's again, this is where Ncuti Gatwa is so great, because there's all these emotions that he's feeling, like there's anger that they won't come with him and how he's being treated, and but also sadness that they're going and they're probably going to their death, and that like he wanted to help them and they wouldn't be helped, and like that's such an amazing scene.
Yeah.
But again, it's like another episode which commentates a lot on loads of different things which are very prevalent in our society. White privilege and being stuck online, and some people just not willing to be saved. Some people don't want to be saved, and that's a really difficult thing sometimes.
And I think it all kind of ties together of the rich whiteness, the privileged of it, and not even specifically whiteness as far as like they are white people, but just the whiteness as a complex. And it's
Yeah,
negative emotions are not to be dealt with; they are swept aside. If anyone dies, like, well, they didn't really die; they were taken to the sky, and you're like, oh, how good for them! Like we have celebrations of life, we don't have funerals. We have, you know, this, we gotta. Everything has to be very calm and presented in a way that's like, you can do it, and like babying. But then if you patronize them, it's like, don't patronize me. And like, she's so rude about it. And you want to root for her because she seems like she's making progress and she seems like she's doing something that's really courageous and literally outside her bubble. But then she's so hard to empathize with because she's so incompetent at life. She literally runs directly into the monsters because she can't navigate without the world being perfect for her and everything set up for her privilege.
Yeah.
And she's so narcissistic that even when her favorite pop star influencer comes to save her, she thinks it's the best day of her life. And he points out, he's like, there are literally thousands of people dying around us. And she's like, it's the best day ever. Because
Yeah.
it's all just about her. And then she even sacrifices him to save herself because she's just so
Yeah.
incredibly narcissistic and wrapped up in her own world, that
Yeah.
she can't even tolerate for her saving herself, in a way that makes her put down her prejudices.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's why that's just a powerful episode. I mean, it is really, there's not really a bad episode in this season. Like, that's normally there's like one or two episodes where you're like, yeah, it's a good episode, but I'm not gonna really remember that like down the line. I'm probably not going to watch it much again. But this season wasn't really like that, you know. Uh, I mean, the weakest episode was probably the first one, but that's still a good episode.
Right.
Like, yeah, I mean, and the episode as well, where I mean, it's not afraid to tackle. I love the boldness of the show. That some episodes the Doctor's not in it much,
Right.
and there's one episode in this season where the Doctor's in the opening scene and the closing scene, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, they're not in it at all. It's all about the companion, and it's a great episode. It's yeah,
And Millie Gibson can carry that. She is
she
strong enough
does,
as
she
an
absolutely
actress
does.
that,
Yeah,
so in this episode, Ruby has to, they trigger a curse, and Ruby has to live out her life to die at an old age. And the whole time she's being followed by this mysterious woman. And throughout her life, the people who love her most, and even people who could help her, even very powerful people, abandon her, just like she was abandoned at birth. And she has to go through her worst fears, constantly being alone in the world. She tries to date, and the men don't stick around because they notice she's distracted. And, she's seeking a purpose. She saves the world from an evil prime minister. All this whole time, like, she's being abandoned and her worst fears are being realized, but she's holding on to faith. It's a show about profound faith, profound hope, because in the end, she gets to warn her past self not to trigger that grief-filled timeline. She gets to live it over again, which we don't get to do literally, but her courage and her persistence and her acceptance, like, she works through these stages of grief with fear and anger and loneliness into this acceptance. And I think that can really give us hope. And we may not be able to literally go back in a time machine or whatever happened there, through this timeline
yeah,
to get to live our life over again and redo like that one thing that triggers a lifetime of grief. But we can leave it for the future generations, that we can keep the faith and keep hoping and keep working to good, even when we are seeing so much grief around us.
yes, and yes, absolutely, that's right. And I mean, in a sense, it's like about generational trauma and
Yes.
not passing that down to the next generation. It's almost like she's doing that to herself. She's like saying, don't carry on this pattern. Don't continue living through this cycle of where you're always alone and always in grief and like and uh, just choose something different. Choose a different life, and she does. And she chooses to continue journeying with the Doctor, and it ends up really well for her as well. I don't know whether I should give away what happens in the last episode, but we're giving away a lot of things anyways. But
Yeah,
yeah, I
it's
mean,
okay.
like,
We got all the spoilers here.
yeah, this is a spoiler episode. So yeah, I mean, eventually she finds her mother, her real mother, and
Yeah,
that's a beautiful moment at the end. And I wasn't expecting that actually. I wasn't sure what would happen, but she's able to kind of start her life over again with a sense of belonging, and that she hasn't got this kind of uncertainty in her life anymore, this thing that's missing,
right.
and she doesn't feel abandoned anymore. She feels loved and
Yeah.
accepted, and yeah, and goes to explore that life. Though I think she's coming back in season two. Um,
Yeah, she's too
would have been,
beloved to not. So the Doctor says, "We'll see you again," but it kind of does conclude that story of her arc of that driving, that motivation of a character is finding her birth mother and having that birth mother be integrated into her life. So
yeah, That is a beautiful thing.
resolution.
Um,
I'll say
yeah.
they were so fun. I love that this is not only a space travel show, like you get to see other planets, but it's a time travel show. So we go to this Bridgerton themed episode where these
Oh,
aliens that are like
it's
killing
my
people by
favorite episode.
cosplaying them.
It's
Yeah,
my
so
favorite episode.
it's
That
so
of the season.
fun. It's Bridgerton. If you love Bridgerton, go watch this episode, even if you don't watch the rest of the show. But these alien shapeshifters are trying to come cosplay, but they have to kill whoever they want to shapeshift into. So there's a lot of death around, and there's this bounty hunter, and the doctor and the bounty hunter fall in love. And it's
Yeah,
very gay, and we don't really get the details, but Rogue, this bounty hunter, has been through a lot of grief. It sounds very much like what we have been through as an audience with the doctor and his companions. And he says, we have to live because they can't. And so it's this drive to keep going on alone because there's this grief. And when Ruby gets caught in a trap for these killer aliens, Rogue substitutes himself in. Rogue saves her
I know. I'm
and
just
gets
like,
sent
oh,
off.
I'm
Oh,
getting chills thinking about it.
yes.
Like, I just, like, oh, that
With
episode, and
pleasure.
it's amazing, that episode, because the chemistry between Rogue and the Doctor is incredible. It just jumps off the screen,
Mm-hmm.
and it's there right from the start. Like when they're I don't know where they are. I think they're in Rogue's spaceship, and the Doctor is playing all these different music.
Oh, yeah.
He plays Kylie Minogue, doesn't he? Like, can't get you out of my head,
Yes.
which is brilliant. It keeps annoying Rogue, and it's ironic because Kylie Minogue was actually in the show as a character a while back when David Tennant was the Doctor. So I mean, Russell T Davies was running the show before because it's yeah, but yeah. I mean, the chemistry is amazing, and also I think it's big because I mean it's like it's not the first time, but it's the first significant moment where you've had an LGBTQ actor playing the Doctor, and then playing that out in an episode as and it just being as normal. It's not seen as it's not kind of like taboo, or it's not like, oh, we should keep this hidden, or like there's nothing like that. It's just like this is a perfectly normal thing for two people to do,
Mm-hmm.
to fall in love, whatever their gender, and to express that, and they do express that, and it's powerful, And then when he sacrifices himself, he shows that when he sacrifices himself for Ruby, he shows that he's worthy of the Doctor's love
Mm-hmm.
because he's willing to sacrifice himself to save somebody that the Doctor loves, and he'll be back. There's no doubt about that. Like I
Yeah.
can't see him not coming back. That's going to be that's going to be great. But yeah, that's a brilliant episode, and like you say, Bridgerton all over. Like yeah, I love that episode. It's just there's so much joy and grief and emotion, and it's like got all the things in it, all the feels.
Well,
Um,
and so you bring up the queerness of the Russell T Davies, the showrunner, who's back again. He ran the show before and he's back. He's very famously gay himself. Has done a lot of very queer television, iconic. Then we have a drag queen as one of the villains, and we have Chudy, who is queer himself and out, and he has played queer characters, including this doctor. And then Ruby has friends who and is part of this band led by a trans feminine lesbian, and she has written a song for this lesbian relationship that broke up. And so you've got queerness woven throughout this, but like you said, it's just so natural. It's just their lives. It's not necessarily like before in 2005 when then Russell wrote in a pansexual character, and he was just loud and exactly what you expect of it. It's played by a guy who is genuinely like that, and so it's not at all like
yeah,
rude in a like bad way, but it's the character of Jack Harkness was like very kissing everybody and making jokes
yeah,
that were innuendo and sleeping around and all these things. And
flirting
it's
with
fun and
Doctor
it's
as well.
cute.
Like
Yeah, flirting and fun and cute and subversive at the time. But I think where we are 20 years later is we need the heartfelt love story. We don't
yeah,
necessarily need the we're queer, get over it, see it in your face, like we're gonna make it funny and queer eye and like everything's loud. And instead it can just be this
yeah,
intense grief over this loss of this friend that's turning into a lover. And it can be, writing
yeah,
love songs for your friends, and your friends just happen to be a trans lesbian. And it's like, you've got this queer character who's played by a queer character who, it's all wrapped up in normalcy. Like, this is just our life. This is just ordinary life, and the griefs and the hopes and the fun and everything that we go through. So it was so important to have that representation super early 20 years ago. But I think I like how Russell has reintegrated into like having a trans feminine character as a teenager, and then having, these all this different representation
Yeah,
throughout the show as just
yeah,
normalized.
yeah, and it's that's right. And a lot of TV is getting like that now. I mean, Schitt's Creek was great for
Mm-hmm.
normalizing that, because in that show again, it's like it's presented just as this is who we are. This is life. There's nothing wrong with it. Like, we're in love, because it's David and um, um, Patrick, and that's a beautiful relationship, and it's like almost central to the last three seasons of the show. It's like it kind of drives the show a little bit, and it's a, but it's the same thing. It's not kind of out loud, this public, like, oh, look at us. It's like this is just normal human beings having normal relationships, and they just
Right.
happen to be LGBTQ relationships, queer relationships,
It's not a
and
gimmick. Yeah.
and it's and that show is huge for the queer community. That show, it really was, and of course one of the writers was queer, Dan Levy. Uh, yeah, but it's the same thing. I mean, that's
Well,
how it should be now. Like, it's just
I'll I'll tell you, Doctor Who is as well. So even though it hasn't been as queer in canon or explicitly stated as we might have liked, the Doctor Who fandom is very queer. That's how I found out that I am part of the community. It's a very asexual fandom as well, because
yeah,
this character has a lot of asexual tropes, one of which is found family. And so we're talking about queerness not only in romantic relationships or sexual innuendo or, these like habits or lifestyle or whatever, but it's friendship, it's found family, it's, going beyond the expectations of society and living as who you are, even when that is someone different than is
yeah,
expected.
that's right. Doctor Who's always been that. It's always been a very progressive show. Sometimes in a quite subversive way, sometimes in a very subtle way, but it's always been that way.
Yeah.
And I love that. I just love that. Uh, and yeah, the Doctor. I mean, even with the previous Doctor, we had um, it wasn't quite as overt, and it was something that grew over over the three or four seasons that we had the female Doctor, and at the end it was kind of this, and it kind I don't know whether it started as a fan fiction thing, but it was, you had the Doctor and one of her companions who kind of fell in love with each other, and uh, and they never really expressed that. Even with they didn't even did they even kiss each other? I don't think they did. I don't
No.
remember, but it was like this beautiful thing, and you could see it was more than just friendship. It was something deeper than that, and although it never got expressed, it was very. They did kind of acknowledge it at the end before she regenerated, um, and that was a big step forward, because we've never seen that in Doctor Who either. And we've seen plenty of doctors fall in love with female companions. We had that with, obviously, with David Tennant, and that was the big thing, and that was great at the time. But
Mhm.
we'd never had the same sex attraction. I don't know. I don't hate that term. Sorry.
No,
We've
I
never.
know what you mean.
I hate that term. That's a
Yeah.
horrible term. I don't
Well,
like
it's all timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly with the
that.
Doctor anyway, because he's always changing genders, and there's probably a different orientation for each one. And so with
Yeah, that's the
14, with the 10th Doctor, he's like, "Oh, I'm the kind of person who talks about being bi out loud." And then you've got
yeah. I
Shuyi,
love
who is like
that.
very gay, and lots of asexual coding in the previous Doctors, and so there's a lot of changing, and everybody can feel represented no matter where you are on the queer spectrum.
Yeah, that's the great thing about the show. I love. Yeah. Well, it's one of many great things about the show. It's fantastic, and I think um, one of the things that I love, I've always related to with Doctor, is that sense of feeling alone.
Mhm.
Like the 10th Doctor, especially. That's why he's my favorite Doctor. Or was for a long time. Like that he felt like, he was like this lonely traveler, and that he lost everyone, and that he couldn't ever have love either, and even all the people he loved just disappeared or died, or went to different universes, or and he got left alone, and the grief of that almost, like when we go back to the 10th Doctor, it almost destroys him, because he, being on his own for too long, he starts to lose that his humanity a little bit, and to get caught up in his own time lordness. And that's another element of the Doctor, actually, which is one of the reasons that the Doctor travels with people, is because he doesn't want to lose, even though he's not human, he doesn't want to lose that side of him.
Yeah.
Because if he lost that, he would stop being the Doctor. He would stop being, he would lose his connection with reality, in a sense, with the outside world outside of him. And that's why you talk about, when you talk about chosen family and found family, that's why that's a very important part of the show, because that keeps the Doctor grounded. It keeps the Doctor connected to people outside of him who will bring out the best in him, and stop him from going too into his own head and into himself and retreating, because he can be like that if he's left on his own. Because there is that side of the Doctor, which is like the rage of the Doctor, which no one ever wants to see, but is a very important part of the character. Like, there's certain things that he just will not stand, and one of my favorite examples of that is with David Tennant's Doctor, when and it's the episode where the Doctor's daughter, where they're all looking for this thing which can basically rebuild a planet and regrow a planet, and they're fighting a war over it, and at the end, one of the people shoots his daughter and kills her, and he's so angry that he goes over and picks out the gun, and he holds it to his head and then just puts it down and says, "I never would." Like, but he's full. You can see he's full of rage, and then he gets this source thing and says, "Make this foundation of this society the man who never would." Like, and he's saying it with anger in his voice, as in, like, you will do it like this because this is how it needs to be. Like, and I love that about the Doctor, in a sense, because it's like this anger at injustice and anger at, this is not how the world should be, and this is how the world should be, and I'm not going to give in to how you all do things. I'm not going to use a gun and kill somebody just because they killed somebody I love, even though part of me wants to. Like, and that's why he needs companions, because if he didn't have companions, he might not have that moment of pause where this is wrong.
Friends remind us of our values, and they also keep us from that bypassing, that escapism. And so his friends are always coming in and saying, "You can grieve this." And the Doctor's like, "Oh, come on, let's go, let's move on, next adventure." And it's like wanting to show off and impress and, be the performer. And I really relate to that. We've talked before on this podcast about me being an Enneagram 3. And so you got that arc of, it's okay. You can feel your feelings. Like, let's sit in this and grieve it and get a hug and acknowledge that this is hard, and not just run on to the next thing. And I think that is so crucial for us, that we have those friends who aren't just like, move on, get over it. Like, it's been 2 days. Like, surely you should be over it by now. But having the friends that say, I will sit with you in that grief. I will be present with you. And I'm going to hold you here, like, and comfort you when you want to run on and just ignore it and move on. It's like, no, it's okay to feel. It's okay. You can be here and be vulnerable with me, and I'm not going to pressure you or judge you. And I think that's such a crucial thing that we all need friends and family and found family for, is that grounding in reality. So I love that in the end, here they face down the literal god of death, and the Doctor has to become the killer of death. And, major spoilers for the end, but, that's the Doctor's so angry because his value system is to be the opposite of the god of death. It's to be this life, to bring joy, to bring life, to bring hope to people. And yet here he is, like, the god of death has forced his hand, and how he must become the killer of the god of death. and in doing so brings life to everyone else. And this whole, it's a beautiful visual of this cloud of death that has rolled over the earth and all these other planets. And now you see, in a callback kind of to a previous episode, you see all these planets coming back to life, and they shout out all the planets we've seen in the previous seasons. And it's
Yeah.
beautiful. But in the end, the Doctor's so angry about it and has to scream about it and release his emotions, because he never wanted to be this. He never wanted to be the killer. He wanted to be just the one who brings life, but he's being forced into it.
Yeah. I
And
think he
even
hates
has
that
an
he's
emotional
being,
problem about that.
he
Yeah.
hates the system, whatever it is, whatever you call it, or the people that are around him force him into this thing that he doesn't want to be.
Right.
And there's this like complete paradox because, yeah, like you say, he's just saved trillions of people and set them free and given them life again. But the one person, but to do that, he's had to kill someone,
Yeah. He
and that
couldn't save. He couldn't
and
save.
that's yeah, he hates that. That's a running thing with the Doctor. The people that he couldn't save, like and he doesn't like it. It hurts him. Every single life that's lost hurts him. Even death. Isn't there another way to contain this? Isn't there another way to stop this? Like, does it have to be this way? Tries to find every other way. You know, uh, even his worst enemies.
Yeah.
He just like he finds it hard because that's totally contrary to who he is. And that's always one of the biggest kind of challenges that every Doctor faces is that how do you stop evil without killing it? You know, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and fortunately, he has a good companion to help him process it, and she's there. Um, and this
This
Doctor's pretty good at processing his emotions. He doesn't keep it in
yeah,
as much,
as much.
which is good. It's nice. It's a nice change actually to not having just running off, being everything's all right again. Or just being strong or everything. It's just yeah.
And it is a bittersweet ending, because we love that Ruby gets everything she's always looked for and had a
Mm.
great time with the Doctor, and yet we still lose our friends. We still grieve for them. They've, gotten a new job or moved off. I know you're about to move countries, and we've got all this, people come in
Yeah.
and out of our lives. I've moved, gosh, 5 times over the past 10 years, since seeing the show originally. And there are some friends who I carry with me, literally in my pocket on my phone, because they're internet friends. But it's then some people you leave behind too, and you have to grieve that even if it's for the best reasons, not death or tragedy or anything bad, but just because they've had a transition in life, we still have to grieve, and we still maybe have that rejection sensitivity or that sense of abandonment haunting us. And
Mm.
it's not neglect, or it's nothing bad. There weren't toxic friends, they weren't anything. It wasn't their inability to care for us. It was just the material reality that in the end, the Doctor is left alone in the TARDIS, and that relationship is over. And there's a quote in the season that, like, they're not gone, they're just dead. And it's still with us always, but not in the way that we wish they were. And so, like, that season of life might end, and it is ended, and we have to grieve that, but it's still part of our lives. It's still memories we can revisit. It's still
Absolutely.
beautiful. Those people have
Absolutely.
made a mark on us forever. So I like that. It is a bit of a bittersweet ending, though, because then you're left with the Doctor is alone and crying in the TARDIS
Yeah,
again.
I always feel so sorry for him. Like,
Yeah.
it's like I actually wasn't sure whether she was going to leave, whether she was going to stay with her mum or not, because I knew already she was in season 2. So like, is she going to stay or like, so I was like, I wasn't
She
like, I was a little bit shocked when she stayed, and I was just really, but I was always just really sad. Like, oh, the Doctor's like, no, he's lost someone else. Like, it's like, oh, can't someone just stick around for a while? For a
Well, and
couple
it's a
of, at
new
least a couple of
adventure.
seasons. Like,
She's planning
um,
on going with the Doctor. Like, she's introduced Louise, her birth mom, to her adoptive grandma and mother,
yeah,
and she's
yeah,
planning on coming with the Doctor again, and says, "Okay, I just need to say bye to them. I'm coming right back." And then she gets a text, and they found her dad, and her dad doesn't even know that she exists because her mom never told him.
Yeah.
And they were 15. This is what kills me, is that her birth mother is my age. And I was like, 35? That's not old enough to have a teenager. But if you're 15, sure, I guess it is. But it was just really funny because I was like, oh no, she's 35. I'm a mother in this. Anyway, but she couldn't keep the baby because her stepfather was a bad guy. So she had to abandon the baby for understandable reasons where could be safe. But this dad doesn't even know about her. And so the doctor tells Ruby, this is your new adventure. And she has to go meet him because she always wanted to know who her birth
Has to
parents
know,
were.
yeah.
So the mystery isn't completely solved yet. So anyway, that's, or at least resolved for her. For Ruby, for us it is as an audience, it's fine. But for Ruby, she still has more to do on Earth. So yeah, I'm hoping we'll see her again because Millie is just amazing. But
yeah, she's great. I thought she was fantastic, and they were such a good team. Those two, they really were. They complement each other so well, and also I think the lack of there needing to be any sexual tension between them
not at all, yeah.
was such a relief.
Right.
There's I mean, that they just love each other, and completely platonically, and it's beautiful, and you could see it, and you could see the actors loved each other as well, really enjoyed working together, and it was just fun for them. So yeah, but yeah, it's one of the best seasons that I've seen for a while, definitely, and the writing was excellent. And Stephen Moffat did an episode, who's like a legendary Doctor Who writer and showrunner, and yeah, Russell T Davies again is another one, but he did most of the episodes. But you also had someone. I think the Bridgerton episode was written by the writer of Loki. I think one of the episodes was anyway. I don't know if it's that one, but one of the episodes was written by one of the writing team from Loki. Yeah, so that was pretty cool. Yeah, so it's and it's coming back next year, so 2026. So we'll 2025. Sorry, God, don't want to jump ahead of myself, do I? 2025 it's back again. So yeah, this has been really great though. I've always wanted to talk about Doctor Who and grief on this show, because obviously we talk about grief on this show a lot, and this is a show that deals with it a lot, and so it's been really good to explore this today.
Absolutely. It's super fun. It's super important with a lot of commentary. It's so rich and vivid, and time periods and history and everything, and painting possibilities of hope in the midst of this grief. It doesn't ignore grief. It doesn't ignore death. It doesn't ignore tragedy. Those are all very real and material things to it. But there's hope always, and there's persistence, and there's always love wins in the end. So I think it's a very important show for us to have in our consciousness at this time.
Absolutely agree. Yeah, thank you, Jenna. And how can people just connect with you online?
Yeah, feel free to follow me on Twitter, Jenna_DeWitt. Also, check out my website, invisiblecakesociety.com, where I have tons of resources about queerness, about feeling invisible, whether it's neurodivergence or asexuality, being a Christian in a very divisive world. So I have a lot of poetry and essays and podcast episodes, much like this one, available. So invisiblecakesociety.com. And I'm on Threads and Instagram as well at Jenna DeWitt. So
awesome. Do give Jenna a follow. She's fantastic. It's and a regular on this show. She'll be back again. I'm 100% certain. The next time Taylor Swift drops Taylor's version of an album, or just another album, we'll be back again. So
she's got to release Reputation sometime. She's going to re-record that album.
I know. I'm ready. I'm ready for this to happen. I need this one to happen. This is the one I'm waiting for.
Yeah, well, she's a little busy right now, but
yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I was a bit disappointed she wasn't in Deadpool and Wolverine. I thought she was going to.
No. Yeah, she is good friends with them though.
They are good friends, aren't they? Yeah, that's right.
She's a little busy. She's on her tour right now in Europe. So
is she still on her tour? Oh gosh.
Yeah, she's still on tour. She's a few more American dates to go, and so we're kind of hoping that once she gets back in America, she'll make a political endorsement and start
Yes,
to.
I think she will. I think she's waiting for the right time to do that. But
On the Taylor Swift news,
maximum impact, like
right?
yeah.
If you are American or just want to support us, we've got Swifties for the number 4, Kamala, and you can follow us there for the Swiftie movement. And
I've been following them. That's fantastic. Yeah.
if you are here for the Jenna and James Taylor Swift commentary, there you got a little bonus content at the end.
Fantastic. All right. Okay. Well, thank you, Jenna. It's always good to have you here. And thanks everyone for listening.